Welcome, everyone, to Mother and Refuge of the End Times. Wish you the warmest greetings for Christmas, and I hope you've all had a wonderful Christmas day and are celebrating Christmas time with your families in joy. Today, we are very blessed to have once again with us Dr. Michael Hesemann from Germany, who on the first anniversary of Pope Benedict's passing is going to be talking to us a little bit more about the Pope, his life, his prophetic ministry, and he's going to talk a little bit about his biography. Dr. Hesemann, you wrote a biography with the brother of Pope Benedict, Gearge Ratzinger, called My Brother the Pope. So today we're going to be discussing the book and just discussing some of the hidden secrets and hidden life of Pope Benedict. Welcome to our channel, Dr. Mike.
Thank you very much. My pleasure and honor to be on your channel.
And sorry for the mix-up in our time zones this morning. That's why we've had a bit of a delay. But thanks for bearing with us, everyone. So, Dr. Mike, would you like to start off with a short prayer?
Of course. In
Go ahead.
German or English? In English, you have to
Go
pray.
ahead.
So I can pray.
Let's do the German. Let's do it in German.
Okay. Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Vater unser im Himmel, geheiligt werde dein Name, dein Reich komme, dein Wille geschehe, wie im Himmel so auf Erden. Unser tägliches Brot gib uns heute und vergib uns unsere Schuld, wie auch wir vergeben unseren Schuldigern. Und führe uns nicht in Versuchung, sondern erlöse uns von dem Bösen. Gegrüßet seist du, Maria, voll der Gnade. Der Herr ist mit dir, du bist gebenedeit unter den Frauen und gebenedeit ist die Frucht deines Leibes, Jesus. Heilige Maria, Mutter Gottes, bitte für uns Sünder, jetzt und in der Stunde unseres Todes. Amen. Ehre sei dem Vater und dem Sohn und dem Heiligen Geist, wie es war am Anfang, so auch jetzt und alle Zeit und in Ewigkeit. Amen.
Amen. So, Dr. Mike, you've known the Pope and his family, his brother George, for quite a while. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to meet him and how you know the family?
Well, actually, I know the family from my own family. My uncle was the ophthalmologist, the eye doctor of Pope Benedict when he still was a cardinal. He had a stroke in 1991, and he was for the rest of his life nearly blind on the left eye, and he wanted to treat it. And my uncle, Professor Siegfried Niedermeyer, was a very famous German expert, and he at least tried to improve the eyesight of Pope Benedict. So I heard a lot of beautiful stories, and my aunt, she has a big collection of handwritten personal letters of Cardinal Ratzinger sent to her. Well, and then in 1998, I wrote my book about the relic of the inscription of the cross. And of course, I delivered a copy to Cardinal Ratzinger, who liked it a lot and wrote me a very nice reply. And we met several times before he became Pope. And so when he delivered this beautiful homily on the funeral of Pope John Paul II, where we all had tears in our eyes, I was commissioned to write a biography of John Paul II for an Austrian publisher. And I wanted this beautiful homily to be the foreword. So I communicated both with him and Archbishop Genswein just before the conclave. And my last correspondence was with Genswein. Well, let's pray for a good outcome of the conclave. And my reply was, I think we both pray for the same outcome. And indeed, when it happened, habemus papam. And so this was a very happy day for the church, but a very sad day for Joseph Ratzinger, who dreamed of retiring and returning to Regensburg and spent the rest of his life writing books and be with his brother in his beautiful little villa in Regensburg. So this was the beginning. And then, of course, I presented him all my future books on audiences. And in 2010, I met Gearge Ratzinger for the very first time. And he was such a beautiful first beautiful person, but also beautiful storyteller. He had a brilliant memory, and he was very good in narrating the memories from the family. And so I said, shouldn't we write a book about your memories? They are part of history. And we both came to the conclusion that we will never be as young as we already are. And, with the age, you are forgetting important things. So, and because his brother knew my books and recommended him to do this book project with me, I did my brother the Pope. And so, of course, after Pope Benedict retired in 2013.
So the Pope's brother asked you to write the biography with him?
And actually, I asked him if he shouldn't write a book, if he shouldn't write a biography, because I found him to have, first of all, a brilliant memory and to be a beautiful storyteller who remembered many lovely details, which is, of course, important. But, you have details in the memory. And actually, the time when I investigated this book and I drove to all the locations in Bavaria with my late dog, Lucy, was one of the most beautiful times of my life, because I was diving into the world which formed those two geniuses, I have to say, because not many people know, but also Gearge Ratzinger was a genius. He was the most important German choir leader of, I have to say, the last century. He was the cathedral choir leader and chapel master of the Regensburg Cathedral, and the Regensburger Domspatzen, this was the name, the Cathedral Sparrows was the name of the choir, in the time when Gearge Ratzinger was director in the 1980s and 90s, became the leading ball choir in the world. They were invited everywhere, to Australia, to the US, to Canada, to Japan, everywhere, and because they were so brilliant, and he was a great composer too. And one of the things I wanted to find out when I wrote this book with him was what made these young men from very simple upbringings. The father was a country policeman, and the mother was a cook. And what made them geniuses in both the world of music and theology? And I found the answer. And there were two reasons. Number one, this family had a very intense prayer life. It was a very pious family. Actually, they met each other because the father placed an ad looking for a wife in the publication in the newspaper of the Marian Sanctuary of Altötting. And then he got a letter from another pious soul, from his wife, Maria Ratzinger. And this family always prayed together. In America, you say a family which prays together stays together. And this came true, and because they really were the closest, most beautiful family you can imagine. I mean, even when he was old and sick, Pope Benedict traveled all the way to Regensburg. And in 2020, when his brother was passing away, was facing his last days, and they wanted to spend time together. And they spoke on the phone every day, and 4 times a year, Gearge Ratzinger went to Rome to spend time with his brother. And before, his sister died in 1991, and she was the housekeeper and the secretary of Cardinal Ratzinger. And then they had Gearge Ratzinger.
So they had one sister?
Were living with them. They had one sister, yes. They were 3 children. Joseph,
so
Mary,
was she working with the Pope during his papacy?
She died in 1991. She was the secretary of and housekeeper of Cardinal Ratzinger until she passed away in 1991. Maria Ratzinger. The mother was Maria.
In Rome? Was she working with him in Rome?
In Rome, yes. In Rome, originally in Munich. She also was with him when he was a professor. He was a professor in Bonn, in Münster, in Tübingen, in Regensburg, and she lived and traveled there. And when he became Archbishop of Munich, she went with him to Munich, and when he became prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, and she went with him to Rome. So, and indeed, this family was praying the rosary every day, kneeling on the kitchen floor. And they went regularly to Holy Mass, of course. The father had a feeling for music and was actually playing an instrument and was singing in the choir of a parish church. And they were moving a lot because he was a policeman and was sending from one police station to the other. But they were introduced in the inspiring world of the Baroque Bavarian Catholicism. And this was the second factor of inspiration, the beauty of this Baroque and Bavarian Catholicism with beautiful churches full of art and splendor. And so the mind reached to the highest height and was inspired by the most beautiful art. And so one of the sons, the older son, became the musical genius, and the younger son became the greatest theologian of our times and the successor of St. Peter, Pope Benedict the 16th. And they moved a lot, as I said, and I went to all the places, all the villages. I visited the churches and the sanctuaries nearby. And indeed, it was something like an enchanted world. And one day when he was Pope, Benedict was asked by a child, Holy Father, how do you imagine heaven? And he replied, well, if I imagine heaven, I'm thinking of the world of my childhood. I'm thinking of the beautiful mountains of Bavaria, of the green meadows of Bavaria, of the flowers, the colorful flowers people put in front of windows in these very picturesque houses in Bavaria, and then the love between the parents and the siblings. So his idea of heaven was his childhood. And he always lived with one foot in heaven. The more older he got, the more, of course, he lived in this deep consciousness. And actually, one of the most beautiful memories I have of Pope Benedict was when he got 90. And I met him in the Vatican Gardens. And I said, Holy Father, I wish you many more good years and health and happiness and inspiration with God's blessing. And he says, please, don't wish me this. And I was flabbergasted. I said, Holy Father, what did I say wrong? Holy Father, you have a beautiful here in the Vatican Gardens. I had nothing better to say. You have a beautiful here in this wonderful Vatican Gardens. And his index finger went even a level higher. And he said, heaven is much more beautiful. So for him, heaven was a reality as it should be for all of us as Catholics. And he knew this was the goal of his life, to get into heaven. I'm 100% sure, because I know his life and I know this man, and I met this man in 3 weeks before he passed away the last time. I'm 100% sure he was a saint and a teacher of the church. And he is in heaven now, and actually we can pray to him or ask him in our prayers to be our advocate in heaven.
I know it might be a bit early, but is the church working on making him a venerable and a blessed and saint?
Unfortunately, not yet. I mean, I'm in favor of tanto subito, but for whatever reason, Pope Francis doesn't consider it prudent to do it in the same way as Pope Benedict did it after the death of John Paul II, where already in May, 2 months after the death of Pope John Paul II, he started the beatification process. Now 1 year has passed and no beatification process is open, so we have to wait for the 5 years, which is the regular cycle, to open a beatification process. And in 4 years from now, we will all make sure that it will be open, because we can be sure that we had.
So is that the new regulation now in the church, that you have to wait 5 years?
This was generally the regulation. I mean, you can only lift it in a special case, as Pope Benedict lifted it in the case of John Paul II.
Sure. Okay. And that process, would that come from Munich, or would it come from a group within the Vatican?
This is the great question. It can come from the group within the Vatican. It can come from the next Pope, because in 5 years, I mean, I wish Pope Francis a long life, but we don't know if he still will be Pope in 5 years or in 4 years. It can be from the Diocese of Regensburg, which surely will precede it, because this was the place where he spent a great part of his life. Munich, he was Archbishop of Munich. He was born in the Diocese of Passau. So there are 4 possibilities: Passau, where he was born; Munich, where he was Archbishop; Regensburg, where he lived most time of his life or had his private life, so to say, his family life; or Rome,
Right.
because he was the successor of St. Peter. So I think it will be Rome, but if not, we can still do it from Passau or Regensburg.
Does the Pope have any other family members still alive?
I mean, nephews and nieces, yes.
Nephews
But
and nieces?
not
Okay.
from the direct family. So there are
Not
no
directly.
Maria Ratzinger, the sister, did never marry and never had children. And of course, Georg and Joseph, of course, never had children. They were a priest. So they come from the siblings of both parents, and
Sure.
the brothers
And
and
George,
sisters of both parents, and so they are nieces and nephews.
and George Ratzinger, he wasn't a priest, was he? Oh, he was a
Georg
priest.
Ratzinger, of course, he was a priest. Yes, he was a
Yes.
cathedral
Sorry.
choir master, but they had the priestly ordination on the very same day. Actually, he was the role model in some way for Pope Benedict, because he was 3 years older. Georg Ratzinger was 3 years older. This is why the interview was so beautiful, why the book was so important, because he remembered the night when Pope Benedict was born. Another example, when I wrote a book about Pope Francis, I interviewed the sister of Pope Francis, and she's a wonderful lady, Maria Elena Bergoglio, living in Buenos Aires. But after I interviewed her, it was clear I shouldn't make a book with her, because she was so much younger, I think 16 years younger, but she doesn't have any childhood memories or whatever. So the interview I did for the book, it was one chapter in the book, but it was sufficient. But this beautiful element to have the older brother remembering everything from the early years from the birth to the vocation, to the time in school, to the vocation, to and as I said, they were together because of the war, because of World War II. Georg Ratzinger, as every German, had to serve in the military. Joseph Ratzinger was too young; he was only serving in the flak. But because of the years of the war, they started to study theology in the same year, in 1946, and ended in 1951. And on 29th of June in 1951, Cardinal Michael von Faulhaber made both of them priests in the cathedral of Freising near Munich, so on the very same day. But as I say, he was the role model. And one of the reasons I can say now, it sounds a little bit strange, but it's on the other way, it's a beautiful headline. Hitler made them priest. Why? Because the father was completely anti-Nazi. At that time, we had a man who will be a saint and murderer very soon. His name was Michael Gerlich. He was a journalist, a Catholic journalist. He became a Catholic journalist after he met Therese Neumann von Connersreuth, the stigmatized visionary in Germany at that time, who was building up a circle of Catholic thinkers who are against Hitler and tried to prevent the takeover of the Nazis, unfortunately without success, but they tried. And Michael Gerlich originally was very skeptical, and when he met her, and he was convinced she was real and had visions from God, and started a newspaper, The Straight Path. And this paper was the most outspoken Catholic opposition paper against Adolf Hitler. And one of his subscribers was the policeman Joseph Ratzinger Sr. And when Pope Benedict and Gearge Ratzinger grew up before 1933, when the paper was forbidden and Michael Gerlich was killed in the concentration camp of Dachau, but before 1933, they saw it on the table of their father and saw him reading it. And the family was so completely anti-Nazi that the father wanted to be removed from the city where he was serving as a policeman, Tittmoning, and wanted to be sent to a village because he didn't want to serve the Nazis and work under a Nazi mayor or whatever as a policeman. So he was downgraded in his career and became the village policeman of Aschau, a very, very small little village, when Tittmoning was a beautiful little town, and taught his family that Hitler for him was the Antichrist. And the sister, Maria Ratzinger, her big dream was to become a teacher. But when the time was ready for her to start studying, she said, no, I cannot be a teacher now because they would force me to teach National Socialist ideas in school. And so she decided to become a secretary, and she became a secretary, which was a very good education she could need when later she became the secretary of Joseph Ratzinger, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, her brother. And Georg Ratzinger and Joseph Ratzinger both went in the only possible and legal resistance in Germany, the Catholic Church. And because they were so disgusted by all this Nazi stupidity, actually Joseph Ratzinger refused to join the Hitler Youth. It was mandatory at that time. Every young boy had to join the Hitler Youth, but in a village, people were not so fanatic and radical. And because he was very thin and very slim and very unsportive and whatever, and a dreamer who spent most of his time reading in the barn of the parents, and they said, okay, you don't need to go. We don't need you there. You don't need to go. So he didn't go. He never went to the Hitler Youth, Joseph Ratzinger. And so already in the Third Reich, they decided to join a boys' seminary of the Catholic Church in Traunstein, where the family, after the father retired, he, after being in the village of Aschau, even decided for early retirement because he didn't want to serve the Nazis anymore, and lived in a very simple old farmhouse in a village near Traunstein in Bavaria, which didn't even have direct water access, but a well in the garden, and the toilet was in the garden too, and we had no electricity for some time, and so on. Very simple. And we went to the boys' seminary because we wanted to become priests to teach the truth of Christ in a time nobody knew at that time if Hitler will stay in power. Hitler spoke of the 1,000 years Reich, and we wanted to teach the truth of the gospel and go into inner resistance against Hitler and the Nazis. And after the war was over, and when they saw so much suffering in the war and in the time after the war, they said, we stay on the way, we have our vocation, and we want to become priest. And so they became priest in 29 of June, 1951.
Right. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about some episodes that you found interesting in his childhood?
Oh yes,
from your biography.
They're very beautiful episodes. One is we even have it preserved. And in Germany before Christmas, first of all, Germans, only a few Germans have the tradition of Santa Claus. And in other parts of Germany, like in Bavaria, it is the baby Jesus, the Christkind, the child, the Christ child, who brings the gifts on Christmas Eve. And children write letters. And we have a beautiful handwritten letter by
Oh, wow.
the young Joseph Ratzinger, where he tells baby Jesus that he was a good boy, and for Christmas he wants a shot. And Shot was a very popular book in Germany with the text of the liturgy. So Catholics want to know, we are speaking about pre-conciliar times when everything was in Latin, and the priest was speaking towards Christ ad dominum and not towards the parish, the community. So if you wanted to know exactly what the priest is praying, you could read it in both Latin and German in the shot.
Right.
And this is what this 9-year-old boy wanted to have for Christmas. And also he was playing priest. He had a handmade, an uncle of him made it, a handmade little altar with a little chalice and a little monstrance and everything. And his mother suit him something which looked like a garment. So they were playing priest. And here Ratzinger sometimes was the ministrant, or sometimes they played it the other way around. Maria Ratzinger was serving as an altar girl, first altar girl in Germany, and so already in childhood they had this vocation and the dream to become priest. Because the Catholic world was something like the contrast, the warm, beautiful, lightful contrast to the dark and cold world of the Nazis. Because he was born in 1927, so he was 6 when Hitler came in power.
Yeah. Well, our title for this episode is about a little bit about the prophecy or the prophetic nature of his ministry. I'm sure you know a lot about some of the extracts that have been going around on the internet about how he talks about the future of the church and how he had a lot of insight into what's happening right now in the church. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. But before, I have to add one little beautiful episode.
Yes.
From Christmas and the childhood. You see, I have the Christmas tree in the background, and we are all in a Christmas mood. And as Catholics, we celebrate Christmas until the 2nd of February, traditionally. And they had a department store opposite of a house in Magdal on Inn, where he was born. And there was a beautiful teddy bear. And very little Joseph Ratzinger, 3 years old, was falling in love with his teddy bear. And every day they went there, and he looked at it and he smiled and he said, "This is what I want for Christmas." And then the teddy bear has disappeared. And he was so sad. He was completely unlucky. And when he found the teddy bear under the Christmas tree, so obviously baby Jesus had heard his prayers and he had his bear. And there is a very interesting element in the life of Joseph Ratzinger, who had the bear in his coat of arms, but the bear of Freising, the Corbinian, the saint of Freising, according to the tradition or the legend, went to Rome with his donkey, and when he crossed the mountains, a bear came and killed the donkey. And so Saint Corbinian said, "Well, I don't want to carry all my luggage to Rome. Now you have to do it." And the bear obeyed and allowed Corbinian to put the luggage on his back and went with him to Rome, according to the legend. And when they came to Rome, the bear was released and returned home, or whatever he did. This is the legend. And Pope Benedict loved it so much, this legend. But as I say, he put the bear of St. Corbinian in his coat of arms. And when he became Pope, he told the story in one of his audiences, and then he said, well, this is like a metaphor of my own life, but I am the bear, and unfortunately, when I came to Rome, they didn't let me go home, they didn't let me free again. And so if you ask me what was the most beautiful Christmas gift he ever got in his life, it was not the shot,
Teddy
which
bear.
was very important, or not the little altar, but it was this little bear which he really decided to have when he was a child. So now came your question about his vision of the future of the church. And his vision of the
Yes,
future
yes.
of the church is what we are experiencing right now. We have the great apostasy in the church. In Germany, every year, 1 million Catholics are leaving the church for several reasons. Of course, some of them to save money, because in Germany, if you are a member of the church, you have to pay a special tax. 10% of your income tax has to go to the church, and people want to save money. But another reason is that most people live as if there wouldn't be any God. Okay, people live a godless life more and more and more. And if you see society and if you see what is going on in the media and everywhere, but if you have such a pervert counterculture, which became mainstream now, was just everything disgusting you can imagine, from really the biggest perversions are promoted in the media and are seen as normal. And if you speak against it, they sue you for hate speech. You can't even say the truth anymore. You can't call sin or deadly sin, which is a sin, anymore in public in Germany. What is horrible. But unfortunately, this ungodly and perverted lifestyle even entered the church in Germany. And we have something called the synodal way, which is a movement, unfortunately, even supported by the majority of the German bishops, which want completely the church to change. They want women ordination. They want the blessing and wedding of homosexuals. They want the end of celibacy. They want a new sexual moral for the church, and so on, and a new catechism for the church. And of course, the conservative, faithful Catholics are shocked about it. And we experience a de facto schism in Germany of the modernists who don't care anymore for the catechism and for the moral teachings of the church, and a small flock of devout and pious Christians who still follow and want to follow the laws of God. And this was predicted already in the 1950s when Joseph Ratzinger, when he was a chaplain in Munich, wrote about the new paganism in Germany, and that most people live like pagans without any Christian attitude in their life. And he predicted that the future of the church will be a small flock in a materialistic big environment. And this already written in the 1950s, it was prophetic, was just prophetic. And then before he became Pope, and maybe one of the reasons why he was elected, he diagnosed the evil of our times and called it the dictatorship of relativism. And relativism means anything goes. It's okay. You can love whoever you want, and if you want to marry your dog, it's fine. And if you want to marry a man, being a man, it's fine. And if you have a couple of partners, it's fine. Or polygamy, it's fine. There's a relativism. No orientation, no values, no doctrine, nothing. And in 2005, it was again prophetic, because only after 2015, when America had Barack Hussein Obama as a president, we had Angela Merkel, which was just as evil, and the liberation of society, the new structure, the new world order was really deeply promoted in an open anti-Christian way. When, for example, homosexual marriage was allowed in Germany, or when the third gender was introduced in Germany. Now, in Germany, there are three sexes, not male and female, as God created, but Mrs. Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, created a third sex called the new ones called männlich, weiblich, diverse. And even when in some places of Germany, even when you want to register your dog, in Germany you have to register your dog and you have to pay taxes for your dog. You have a little questionnaire, and it's a sex of the dog, male, female, and diverse. And I mean, I love dogs. I had dogs for all my life. There's a dog just behind me. But I never in my life met a diverse dog. I know male dogs and female dogs, but everything else is just not existing.
It's the dog.
Yes. And if humans have this identity crisis, all right, but for sure dogs don't have. But this gives you an idea of relativism in our society and this dictatorship, because if I speak openly against it, I mean, then somebody can even sue me. And if I say openly, if I declare Christian values, and many priests and preachers, both Catholics and even Protestants, who spoke openly about the laws of God regarding homosexuality, were sued and put on court in Germany because it is forbidden to say the plain truth. And I mean, this is just a very tragic development of the last couple of years.
I want to read the quote. I've got it in front of me, and it's a really remarkable quote that goes around a lot on the internet, of Pope Benedict. I think it was written in the 1950s. I'm not sure, but you can clarify. It says this: soon we will have priests reduced to the role of social worker and message of faith reduced to political vision. Everything will seem lost. But at the right time, at the most dramatic stage of crisis, the church will be reborn. It will be smaller, poorer, almost catechumenal, but also more holy. For it will no longer be the church of those who seek to please the world, but the church of the faithful to God and his eternal law. The rebirth will be the work of a small, seemingly insignificant, yet a domitable break past a purification process, because this is how God works against evil. A small pack resists.
Yep. This is the small flock or small pack.
Yeah.
This was the document, this was the text I was referring to. And I'm very grateful you read it in a perfect English translation. But indeed, he was a prophet, and that's why he should be declared a teacher of the church. He knew, he diagnosed the sickness the church is suffering from, and the disease of modernism, the disease of relativism, so early in the 1950s. And when in Germany, the facade of society was still Christian, but behind the facade, after the 12 years of Hitler, and then in the materialism of the times after the war, the post-war period, when everybody cared for the Wirtschaftswunder, it was called, which means the miracle of economy, but economy went strong again and went up again in Germany. From the ruins, became one of the richest countries in the world. And people concentrated on materialism and on wealth and success, and forgot about true values, and forgot about true religion, and forgot about, but we are children of God, first of all, was a mission in our life, and the mission in our life is to prepare us for heaven. And this transcendental aspect, you find very rarely in the church in Germany. And most homilies, I'm happy that I live in a town where we have good priests, but most homilies in Germany are political, are dealing with something like the climate change or social justice or whatever, the war in Ukraine or whatever, but not with the spiritual aspect of the gospel, and not with the transcendental aspect, not with the importance of prayer and conversion. Indeed, something like the prayer of the Rosary, which worked so many miracles in the history, is considered old-fashioned by many modernist priests even. And for example, a friend of mine, he went to the seminary in Rottenburg, Stuttgart, which is one of the biggest German dioceses. And he was thrown out of the seminary. Why? Because he had a statue of Our Lady of Fatima in his room, and he prayed the Rosary every day. And the pagans of the seminary went to him and said, young man, if you have such a childish belief, and if you pray the prayer of the old ladies and have such a kitschy statue there, you are not ripe enough and adult enough to become a priest. Thanks God, this young man joined the Benedictine order and became a very good monk. And now he is a very important person in one of the leading Benedictine monasteries in Germany. So he turned out to be a wonderful priest. But they don't want it. They want a worldly church, the modernist theologians in Germany. They want a worldly church, a political church, an ecological church, a green church, a red church, but not the church of Jesus Christ, and not a church which concentrates. Our Lord said, when Pilate asked him, are you a king? He replied, my kingdom is not from this world. So he refused any politics. He told everybody wanted him to be the liberator from the Romans and the political messiah and whatever. And he said, no, my kingdom is not from this earth. And as Christians, we should give much more attention to the words of the Lord and prepare for eternal life. This is what our Lord promised, eternal life. And so someone like Benedict or like any saint lived always with one foot in heaven, knowing that the most important thing in life is not to save the planet, is not to feed the poor.
Politics,
It's secondary. The most important thing is to prepare for heaven, to live a life in prayer and purity and with the sacraments, which are something like the entrance ticket for heaven, if we receive them regularly and use and allow them to transform us interiorly. But this transcendental aspect is lacking more and more in what the church is teaching publicly, at least here in Germany. I don't know how it is in the US or in Australia. I can only speak about Europe. I can only speak about Germany. But he was a prophet, he is a prophet, and he's a teacher of the church. And we can be so grateful what God sent us with prophetic voice in the midst of our times. Because here we find orientation in a very beautiful language and a very simple language. Nobody can understand Karl Rahner, but everybody can understand Joseph Ratzinger. I mean, even Karl Rahner didn't understand himself. I mean, he never proofread what he wrote because he knew he wouldn't understand it. He just wrote it down, one page, one sentence. This is Karl Rahner. But Ratzinger called the Mozart of theology. This is a clear, simple language. You and me, as simple people and not theologians, I'm an historian, I'm not a theologian, will clearly understand and find orientation and find answers And I'm so grateful that Pope Benedict managed to write one of his most important books, the trilogy Jesus of Nazareth, even in office as Pope, because this gives us a very clear vision of the life of Jesus and his message for us today. And in an age which is completely confused by modernist theology, which completely develops their own image of Jesus according to their own needs. I mean, they create Jesus according to their own image. God created man according to his own image, but theologians create Jesus according to their own image, often enough. There's a beautiful joke about it. Two theologians meet in the morning and both have the same newspaper under their arm. Tomb of Jesus discovered. And they said, "Oh, did you read it? The tomb of Jesus was discovered." And the true tomb of Jesus was discovered. And the other said, "Yes, and he was still inside." And the other said, "No, this can't be true. This would mean that he really lived."
Yeah.
Okay, this means that he really lived. But he was a real person. And unfortunately, this little joke tells us about the tragic of modern theology. They teach theology as if there would not be a God and God becoming man and teaching and revealing it. They believe they are superior to the Gospels because they want to decide which is the ipsissimus verbum Jesu Christi. They want to decide which was said and was not said and invented by the evangelists, by the authors of the Gospels. And instead of accepting it all to be true, because I mean, the four Gospels were written under control of the apostles. The apostles were still alive when the Gospels were written. And so they would certainly not have allowed any text which includes inventions and fantasies. And also the eyewitnesses were still living. And of course, they wouldn't accept any kind of fictitious story. So we have to recognize that the Gospels are true, and we have to ask, what are they telling us about Jesus of Nazareth? And this is what he did in these 3 wonderful volumes, which are one of the greatest treasures he left us.
And that was one of his best-selling books, Jesus of Nazareth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About my Jesus of Nazareth or about his Jesus of Nazareth?
It's about Pope Benedict's best. That was the most.
I was just talking about it because I was asked by my publisher when it came out to write an archaeological book, and we gave it the same title, Jesus of Nazareth, and he smiled when I told him about it. He allowed it, of course. There's no copyright on Jesus of Nazareth, and this is something like an archaeological companion, and it came out in America too. But as I say, it presents the true teachings of Christ and the meaning of Christ and his mission in the language and thinking of our times. And, for Benedict, it was always important to combine faith and reason. So faith should never be unreasonable, but reason should never be without the basement of faith. And philosophies which argue without acknowledging the existence and reality of God always end up in a catastrophe. This is like Marxism, it's a catastrophe. But materialism is horrible. But the bridge between faith and reason, God gave us the reason, God gave us the mind to recognize what is true and to deal with the matters of the world. And so here we have this combination of, on one hand, theological science, but also a deep vision which he developed in his own life as a man of prayer. And his theology was always a theology on the knees, a theology of a man who prays, who lives in the sacraments, who has a clear vision of the reality of God, and I'm pretty sure received a lot of inspiration from the Holy Spirit. And so this makes them really a treasure, because they are on the highest level for anybody who wants a theological compendium about what Jesus taught. But also you can contemplate on this text, on these 3 volumes, as if it would be a mystical writing, and you get a lot of spiritual insight from it too. And this makes these 3 books really so impressive. But everybody who reads them, it might be a highly educated intellectual, it can be just a simple woman from the street, everybody will find a beautiful vision of Christ and find the beauty and clarity in this book. And clarity and truth was something like the hallmark, was something like the signature of Pope Benedict in everything he did. Everything he did was full of clarity and truth and a deep, wonderful faith.
Doctor, I want to move on to talk a little bit more about the controversial part of Pope Benedict's life, and a bit about some of the struggles that he may have faced as a pope and what may have led him to retirement. I'm sure you have some insight into that.
Well, the pontificate, the 8 years of the pontificate, were, of course, a very exhausting time for him, because he was a very scrupulous person. He took everything very serious and with a lot of gravity, and he was not really able to relax and let it go. So this great burden of responsibility which lied on him made him sleepless many nights. And if you don't sleep enough and don't sleep deep enough, and if you're tortured by thoughts and worries, it's very bad for your health. And actually, when I met him by the end of 2012, I said to friends of mine, in the next year we will have a conclave, because I was pretty sure he would not survive the next year. And the same he himself believed. I met him after his resignation in October 2013, and I had a little gift for him, a beautiful reliquary with a relic of Celestine V, the Pope who resigned in 1294. And he said, "Mr. Hesemann, you really want to leave it to me? I will only live for a couple of months, so it is for sure a waste to leave it with me." And I said, no, Holy Father, I pray that you live much longer, and I leave it with you. And thanks God, he lived for 10 more years, nearly 10 more years, and 9 more years. Okay. And it tells you how exhausted he was, and nobody believed that he would live for another 10 years or 9.5 years. Nobody believed it. And then when this burden was taken from him, he recovered. He recovered, and he became quite strong again, or healthy again, for a man in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s. And but then, especially after his brother passed away in 2020, we had a constant decline. And I was probably the least person outside of the Vatican who met him. I met him the last time on December 10 of last year, 2022.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, intellectually, he was so clear. He remembered names and people from like 50 years ago. For example, we spoke about the death of a very dear common friend, Father Peter Gumpel, a Jesuit father who was the relator in the canonization or beatification process of Pius XII. And he said, yes, I remember not very well when I met him the first time, and he was attacked, and I defended him on the Second Vatican Council, and against Professor, what was the name? Genswein, do you remember the name? Genswein said, no, I don't remember. Oh yeah, this and this. And then he remembered the name again. So his memory was crystal clear. His mind was crystal clear. You and me would be jealous to have such a brilliant mind as he had 3 weeks before he passed away. But his body was so weak. I spent 1 hour with him, and he was, during the 1 hour, he didn't even met his head most of the times. And when he spoke, he had a very weak voice, but most of the times Archbishop Genswein, who was used to it, had to translate, had to repeat what he said. And with every second word, he was coughing because he had breathing problems. So it was clear that it was the last meeting. And when I said farewell to Archbishop Genswein, when I left the Domus Mater Ecclesiae, Monastero Mater Ecclesiae, I said to Archbishop Genswein, it breaks my heart when I imagine this was the last time I met him. And Archbishop Genswein replied and said, most probably it was. And we are only talking about weeks, maybe months, but for sure not more. So this was clear. And then came on the 27th, today, 1 year ago, the sad news, but he had this breakdown, and 4 days later he passed away. And for me, it was a sign from heaven, because on the 31st of December, when I read the sad news on the internet, suddenly somebody rang at the door. It was the postman. And the postman brought me a parcel from Pope Benedict with his sacchetto, with his white skull cap. And as a gift, he wanted to send me for Christmas, but of course, you know, the mail took longer. But so I still have it, and the sacchetto of Pope Benedict, as beautiful.
Do you have it with you? Can we have a look?
Yes, I can bring it. 1 moment, I bring it over.
Thanks. Let's see how long you'll be. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you all had a great Christmas with your family this year.
So, of course, I have it in a reliquary, but I can remove the head of the reliquary. And you'll see it was sent by Archbishop Genswein on the 12th of December. And this is one of the last sacchettos Pope Benedict was wearing, and which arrived on, you see here, yeah, beautiful. The arms even in front. On the 31st of December of last year. So I was feeling a little bit like Elisa, who received the coat of Elijah, who was taken up to heaven in the fiery chariot. So it was a greeting from heaven. And of course, you know, I immediately drove to Rome and participated in the funeral. And I will be back in Rome this 31st of December, when we have a commemorative service celebrated by Archbishop Genswein on 8 o'clock in the morning in St. Peter's Cathedral. So,
what was the message that was sent with the hat of the Pope?
No,
what was the message that?
It was only a confirmation, but he has won it. There was no. It was the printed Christmas card of Pope Benedict. But it was maybe a little thank you, because when I came with a big suitcase full of German Christmas bakery stuff, you know, cookies and cakes and whatever, stolen a German Christmas cake or gingerbread and so on, what you all liked. He loved everything sweet. And, you know, I really had a big suitcase. So when I came in, Genswein opened the door. Of Genswein, don't think I want to move here. Okay,
fresh from Germany, eh?
I don't plan to move here. I still have my suitcase because there was no other way to transport it, and he had to laugh. So I can only say that I can also show you a photo of the last meeting. One moment.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
this was on the 10th of December of last year, and I'm giving him a little gift for his 95th birthday, which we had in April, which is a portrait of St. Augustine, his favorite teacher of the church. So, if I summarize, I have to say that I was so grateful to meet this wonderful man who always inspired me. I mean, I wrote 49 books by now, and at least 20 of them are inspired by something said or done by Pope Benedict. I followed him to the Holy Land. I followed him when he was on his 3 visits in Germany and gave out his speeches and homilies during his tour in Germany and whatever, but also books like Jesus of Nazareth, like Mary of Nazareth, like
Yes.
my book about St. Paul, my work about Pius XII were inspired by him. So his pontificate for me was a constant inspiration, and I wouldn't be who I am without him. So I can only say in Germany, we say, in Bavaria, we say, vergelt's Gott. So what means God reward you for it. So I can only say, vergelt's Gott, Heiliger Vater, God reward you for it. And I'm sure he is in heaven now, and I'm sure we all
Yes.
have an advocate in heaven, and I'm sure he is praying for the future of his church, both in the world and in Germany. And we will recognize that we had a true prophet in our midst in this wonderful 8 years of his pontificate, which again exhausted him a lot because they tried to scandalize it, and because every problem he took so serious, and which was such a burden to him, but it nearly killed him, and he was completely exhausted. And after a little breakdown on his trip to South America, he, in many hours of prayers, decided it was at the right time to put this burden onto stronger shoulders. And this was
Did you meet with him several times after his resignation?
every year. Was
Yeah.
only in the Corona years, in the years of the pandemic, 2020 until 2021, I couldn't meet him. I met him in 2019. I was supposed to meet him in March 2020, but of course couldn't because of the lockdown. And of course, I didn't want to endanger him. And then again in December 2022, but before the pandemic, every year.
And he didn't have any regrets or anything for resigning, or did you see any of that? Not at all.
Not at all. For sure, not at all. And he knew it was the best to do because, as I say, he was a brilliant man, a wise man, but he never was a physically strong man. And with physical strength in every aspect, his body was rebelling against him and against the Petrine office. And that's why he never wanted to be Pope. People will say, oh, look, he gave the homily and he wanted to impress the cardinals, and he wanted to present himself as the right Pope. And no, there is nothing he wanted more than returning to Regensburg and spend the last years of his life with his brother. And actually, his brother was so frustrated and sad, Gearge Ratzinger, when he learned that his brother was elected as Pope. But for
Really? Wow.
one day, he didn't go to the telephone, he didn't react on nothing, and he was just sad and depressed because all the dreams of some beautiful years together were shattered. So it was a great sacrifice, but he accepted it because he accepted it as the will of God until it was just not possible anymore. And We have to be grateful for him, because who knows what would happen. A stroke would have been an option. His doctors were warning him, and if you have a pope who is completely paralyzed, who can't even communicate, and then you can't replace him because he's still pope, and would be very bad for the church. And so he took his decision in prayer, and it was the right decision, as much as we were all sad about it and sorry about it.
It was a fully free decision. Like, no, there was no pressure or anything on him at all.
Not from outside, from his body, yes, but not from outside. No, for sure.
Just from his body, yeah, not from outside.
Yes. No.
Yeah. Did he have a relationship with?
The problem was that he was
continue.
taking all the problems which the church de facto has too serious.
Yes.
And he was suffering physically from it, and this weakened him, especially that he couldn't sleep properly anymore. This was really weakening him a lot, and taking away all energy and fitness and health he still had. Yes. Now your question.
Did he have a relationship at all with Pope Francis before he became a pope? Did they know each other? Did they converse with each other?
Of course, he received him. Cardinal Bergoglio was a member of the College of Cardinals, so of course he knew him and he met him. But honestly, none of us ever thought that he will be the next pope. Actually, everybody believes Scola will be the next pope. And when there was the white smoke coming from the Sixtine Chapel, the Italian bishops already sent a telegraph congratulating Scola for his pontificate. Scola from Milan, yes. So Pope Francis came completely unexpected. He came completely unexpected, and I don't know of any Vatican journalist, and I'm accredited to the Holy See press office, and I was in Rome during the conclave, and I spoke to many colleagues, and nobody suspected it would be Bergoglio. But
and what do you think Pope Benedict's reaction was? What do you think his reaction was to Pope Francis becoming Pope?
Surprised. Yeah. I mean,
he was very surprised, was he?
Yes, they had a good relationship. The first thing Pope Francis did was to call Pope Benedict. Later, it turned out that they disagreed in several instances. For example, about the old Mass, the Tridentine Mass. But on a human point of view, it was a very friendly relationship. Pope Francis himself, what was a little bit strange, said it was like having your elderly grandfather in the house. Well, I mean, Pope Francis is only 10 years younger, so could have said younger brother, older brother, but grandfather normally indicates like 40 years older, which was not the case. But still, it was a very friendly relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know there's been a lot of talk about a recent interview with the Archbishop Gainswain and revealing some of those disagreements that the Pope may have had. Do you have any further insight into that?
Well, I have to say openly, I'm very disappointed about the treatment of Archbishop Gainswain. I mean, you can compare Archbishop Gainswain to Cardinal Dziwisz, the secretary of John Paul II. And what happened with Dziwisz after the death of John Paul II? He became a cardinal, and he was sent to Krakow, to the original see of Cardinal Wojtyła, and became the new Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow. So this was a very wise solution of the question what to do with Archbishop Zivich, and to send Archbishop Genswein back to the seminary in Freiburg where his career began. I mean, sorry, but I mean, he never did anything wrong. Okay, there was no scandal, nothing he caused. He only served the church, and he served both popes even for 8 years. And so he really does not deserve this treatment. I have to say it in all clarity, with all respect to Pope Francis, but absolutely, Archbishop Genswein does not deserve this treatment, and it is very, very sad. And it's throwing a shadow also on the pontificate of Pope Francis to treat a man like Genswein, who was and who is the spiritual son of Pope Benedict. I call him the representative of Pope Benedict on earth now. Okay. And there would have been a much, much better solution. Make him Archbishop of Germany, or make him head of a sanctuary like Loreto, where Capovilla, the secretary of John the 23rd, became the head of the sanctuary in Loreto, whatever, but not sending him back to the seminary in Freiburg to live in an apartment next to all the students. I mean, come on. And once again, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, he served Benedict for all his life, and he was a very, very good and brilliant, and he is a very good and brilliant man. He was a very good and brilliant secretary, papal secretary and prefect of the papal household. And he is too young, too brilliant, too gifted to send to an early retirement. This is just a waste of his talent and genius.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame, absolutely.
Thank you,
shabby.
Yeah,
treat him this way. But, once again, I don't know the reason. I don't know why Pope Francis treats him this way. Maybe he's angry about the book. I mean, the publisher made him very bad move by announcing the book even before Pope Benedict was buried. Normally, you wait a little bit. And but this was a decision of the publisher, not of Archbishop Genswein. Archbishop Genswein wrote the book with the permission of Pope Benedict to be published after his death. But the publisher wanted to make the quick money. But this is not the responsibility. I'm an author by myself, and I know it's up to the publisher when he publishes the book. And so Pope Francis should have recognized what. And this was out of control and going out of control, and was certainly not against him. And if you read the book, what is written in the book about Pope Francis is full of respect. And there are no secrets told or anything like this, but it is just full of respect. So there's no way to treat him like this. And no reason, no justification to treat him like this. And I can only say, I am still in regular contact with him, and I can say, in my eyes, he is one of the most brilliant men our church has. And I wish him a good future as an important voice in the church and with a new position. And he will hopefully receive this in the next pontificate.
Yes.
The recognition he deserves.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Mike, for spending this time with us. We've got probably another 5 minutes to go. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about Pope Benedict's spiritual life? We know that he was a devotee of the Rosary. Were there any private revelations? Were there any other devotions that he really liked to promote or to live out?
Very important for him was the sanctuary of Altötting, which was actually only a couple of miles away from his town of birth or village of birth, Magdalem Inn. And in his early childhood, the family regularly went to Our Lady of Altötting, which is the leading Marian shrine in Bavaria. And it is maybe not so well known, but he was a great devotee of Our Lady and had a very strong Marian piety and devotion to Our Lady. He did not have, as far as I know, he never spoke about it at least, private revelations in any kind, no apparitions of Our Lady or our Lord, but he lived with one foot in heaven, and
Yes.
he was very interested and very open to the life of the saints, and also the visions of the saints, for example, in Fatima. And he wrote a
Right.
brilliant commentary on the third secret of Fatima, for example, when he was still prefect of a congregation of the Doctrine of Faith in the year 2000, when it was published on order of John Paul II. So his life was very deeply devoted to the sacraments and Eucharistic adoration, with a strong element of Bavarian
Devotion, spirituality.
Bavarian spirituality, Bavarian devotion. Patrona Bavariae, for example, the image of Our Lady, which is the patron of Bavaria, which was consecrated to Our Lady already 250 years ago, played a great role. And he never began a day without celebrating Holy Mass. He never ended the day without saying the Rosary. He prayed the hours, the hours like in the monastic life. And so prayer for him, even when he was an intellectual who dedicated a great part of his life in reading and studying and writing, his prayer life and the sacraments were priority for him. That's why I say
Yes.
his theology is a theology which was really developed kneeling in front of the living God. And he knew that there's a living God. Okay, we might have had a Papa Emerito, but we never had a Deo Emerito. We never had a retired God. And he knew that God is acting. And he believed in divine providence. I'll give you one example. On the day when he was crowned, so to say, who had his inauguration mass on the 24th of April 2005 at the shores of Malta, divers found one of the anchors, which most probably come from the shipwreck of St. Paul. And because the shipwreck of St. Paul, it was a grain ship from Alexandria, and on this anchor there was an inscription, Isis, Serapis, which were the main gods of Alexandria. And just the fact that this altar was found at the very same hour when he became Pope, when he had his first Holy Mass of his coronation, as I said in earlier times, as Pope, was so significant that I, during an audience, brought him a picture of his anchor and all this information. And he said, Mr. Hesemann, I think, and don't you think so, this is a sign of divine providence. And then I said, Holy Father, for sure. And in one of my books, I call him the Pauline Pope. St. Paul, not only that he was the Pope of the Pauline year, 2008, 2009, but St. Paul was the bridge builder between Greek philosophy and early Christian theology, and actually the first theologian. And like Pope Benedict built the bridge between faith and reason, St. Paul built the bridge between Greek philosophy and the gospel. And so he was the most intellectual of all apostles of our Lord, and the one with the most profound education in Jewish theology, and who knew the scriptures, but also knew the antique philosophy and thinking. And I organized for him that he was able to see this anchor when he came to Malta a couple of years later. And this gigantic big lead anchor was brought actually outside of the St. Paul's Grotto on Malta. And the diver, I arranged for the diver, was there to explain him everything. And he asked it only one question. He said, are you sure it's from an Alexandrian grain ship? And the diver said, yes, absolutely. Every archaeologist is sure. So for him, this question was cleared. So here you see his belief in divine providence, in his great interest for science of divine providence. And we had another very beautiful example when he asked God for forgiveness and God replied. And his first trip to any foreign country after the World Youth Day, where he had to fulfill the promise of John Paul II to come to Cologne. But then his first papal trip was to Poland. And he clearly said from the very beginning, I want to go to Auschwitz. And his Secretary of State at that time, Cardinal Sodano, said, Holy Father, this is a minefield. You are German, the German Pope in Auschwitz, they will jump upon you, and every little gesture will be misrepresented and misunderstood. Don't do it. And he said, no, I want to go to Auschwitz. I have to go to Auschwitz because I am German, because I'm Pope. And this is we go the Calvary of the 20th century, as John Paul II called it. And he went to Auschwitz, and in a very humble, simple way, he asked God for forgiveness for the evil done in Auschwitz. And in this very moment, and everybody who was there saw it and photographed it and filmed it, a rainbow appeared. It was a rainy day, of course, and suddenly in this moment, a rainbow appeared. And we know the rainbow from the Bible, which was the sign of the new union of God and man after the deluge, after the great flood. Noah survived, and the sign for Noah. So, but in the moment when the German Pope asked God for forgiveness in Auschwitz, a rainbow appeared. I mean, for all of us, this was a sign from heaven, and
beautiful
for him too. And he firmly believed in this kind of signs from God and in divine providence, and that we have a living God with whom we can communicate and who will answer one way or the other, and very often in science.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Doctor. Would you like to make any final comments or a conclusion before we say goodbye?
Sure, absolutely. And with Pope Benedict, we have one who can inspire us, and it is so good and important for all of us to read his homilies, to read the books he wrote, to get a clear view of the Catholic faith. We need it all. It is like studying theology from a master, from the greatest theologian of our times. I repeat again, his books are written in such a clear, simple language that everybody, from the housewife to the worker, to whatever, you don't have to be an intellectual, but also, of course, to the academician, and will understand it and will profit from it. And we really have to rediscover this treasure he left. He passed away, and we all inherited something from him, and we all mentioned in this testament, and we all his heirs, because we all have access to his books. And I'm very much looking forward that in 2024 they will publish the homilies he gave between 2013 and 2017-18, I think, in the private chapel of the Monastero Mater Ecclesiae. I was invited to celebrate Holy Mass with him 3 times. So I know the atmosphere in his private chapel when the 4 Memores Domini, the 4 housekeepers of him, were sitting in the first row, of course, next to Archbishop Genswein. And on every Sunday, for this very, very small group, he wrote a very long and profound homily, because he said, as a duty, this is my duty as a priest, I have to write a good homily. And these homilies are not written for a wide audience, but they have a very high theological level, because, these 5 people who were inside, all were highly educated in theology, also the Memores Domini as religious sisters. And so one of these ladies had a tape recorder running. And so we have word by word, we have them preserved. And Father Lombardi...
And they've never been released to the public?
Published, and Father Lombardi, together with Archbishop of Genswein, coordinated the publication, and this beautiful book will come out in 2024, first in Italian, and then for sure translated into English and German and all other languages of the world. And I'm so much looking forward, because this will reflect the insight into teachings of Christ and into the Gospels in the last years of his life. And of course, we all grow with the years. We are like wine, which becomes even better and more precious the older it gets. And the reflection of his life as a theologian, as a prefect of the Congregation of Faith, as the Pope, and the reflections of around 90 years in deep prayer, even from childhood on, we will find in this publication. And last Sunday, one of the leading German papers published one of his homilies on St. Joseph, actually, his patron saint. And I can only say I'm so deeply impressed. But I say this book, which will come out, will enrich all of us, and can only recommend each and every one of you to watch out and get it as soon as it's out. God bless you, and let's rediscover our teacher of the church, our wonderful Pope Benedict, and let's be grateful that he was teaching to us, speaking to us for so many years. And let's rediscover our Catholic faith with his help, because he is the best guide. He himself made it to heaven, and he will guide all of us to heaven too. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you all. Thank you so much, Dr. Hesemann. Till next time, everyone, take care, and God bless you all.